I'm going to go ahead and have Deputy Clerk, can you please see if we have a quorum this morning? Present on the floor is Senator Toniata, Senator Frank Blas, Vice Speaker Cruz, Senator Guthert, Senator Palacios, Senator Uggan, Majority Leader Senator Respicio, myself. Yes, we do have a quorum. Last night when we had recessed, before we had recessed, we were still deliberating on Bill 373-30. Senator Blas, bro, I will recognize you. Please proceed.
Sus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the interest of continued collaboration and to bring about a bill that addresses all the concerns that this body was deliberating on for much of the day, much of the afternoon yesterday, in the interest of continuing and to making sure that something does get addressed with regards to the utilization of the Chamorro language in our paid advertising for government ads. That I'm going to retract my motion to send Bill 373-30 COR to the third reading and request that move Bill 373-30 to the bottom of the second reading file with all the amendments attached.
On that motion, if there's no objection, motion carries. Thank you, Senator Blas. As we suspend discussion on that and move it down to the second reading file, we're next on the item agenda is Bill number 179, and I will recognize the Vice Speaker at this time. Vice Speaker BJ. 179 as further substituted.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to place Bill 179 on third reading.
As substituted?
As substituted by the Committee on Rules on third reading, and I'd like to be able to discuss the bill.
Okay, please proceed.
Madam Speaker, initially Bill 179 was introduced to take advantage of what we thought was going to be a USDA loan for $103 million that the governor had gotten some commitment on. I think it was a year ago now, maybe even more than that, maybe about 15 months ago. And we also at the same time were able to close on the $202 million bond. And it looked like the $103 million was available for other uses. And so a number of us all made a run for the hopper and introduced several bills trying to figure out what to do with the $103 million. And initially, you and I and Senator Respicio had introduced 179 in the hopes of utilizing some of that money for the museum. And the rationale that we had at the time for wanting to use it for a museum was that it was going to be revenue generating. It would at some point be self-sustaining, and so we thought that that would be one of the better uses of the $103 million. But also being concerned about the fact that we as a tourist destination needed to have something on Guam that the tourist would want to come to and see. We thought that the museum was going to be the answer, or one of the answers. It was either that or a convention center, and a couple of other things were being considered at the time. So we thought we would use Section 30 as the backup payment to secure the loan. Over the last year, the USDA loan has languished, and I guess last week the governor announced that he was going to not accept the USDA loan for various reasons, among them the fact that it had a Buy America provision and had some special provisions as it relates to the utilization of workers on projects. And so it was going to be impossible to try to switch that money over with the bond money that had been raised for the landfill. The governor also did not want to increase the debt limit, the debt of the government of Guam by that large sum. At the same time, you and I had met with USDA, and we had been discussing with them the possibility of them providing a much smaller loan, a loan that would be sufficient to underwrite the construction of what is referred to in this bill as the Guam Institute of Cultural Heritage and Natural History. For short, just for the purposes of shortening it, a museum is what this was going to be. It was going to be a combination of an educational facility, but it was also going to provide a place to display artifacts of Chamorro history. It was going to be a place where you could display Chamorro culture and our heritage. It was going to be a combination of different things. The Guam Museum Foundation had been working on this project for, I guess now it's over 4 years, maybe more than that, because I was originally on that foundation way back, and I'm starting to lose track of time when you get to this age, and everything seems to mesh. But they have an initial A&E drawing. It's not the total architectural engineering. They had a contest on the design, and they've chosen a design. They've chosen a location, and they've been moving along trying to plan for this. Unfortunately, they've not been able to get any money. They've been having some fundraisers, but needless to say, 10,000 here, 20,000 there isn't going to be able to meet the needs of building a $20 million museum. In our discussions with USDA over the last couple of months, meeting with the Museum Foundation and the First Lady, they've assured us that they could, if we could get legislation through this body before next week, provide a loan for $20 million, and the interest would be less than 5%. I think it's in the high 3s or the low 4s, but it is less than 5%, which is an excellent rate. And we've been in discussions with the Museum Foundation and working it out with them on how much was going to be needed, how much the annual payment on the loan would be if we took out a $20 million loan. The issue was still what would be the source of repayment. At the same time, the Committee on Tourism had been meeting, and we had looked at our budget and projections and discovered that we could use Tourist Attraction Fund money to underwrite the cost of this building or guarantee the repayment of the loan with TAF funds. Currently, TAF funds are being utilized at the rate of about $7.5 million a year to repay a $56 million bond for the building of the San Vitores Road. The repayment on the $56 million bond has been on schedule. In fact, it has been paid up to the point where this current year or this upcoming year, the payment will drop, the annual payment on the loan, on the bond would drop from $7 million to $4.5 million. So there was going to be some $2.5 million difference there that was going to be made available to GVB and for the Committee on Tourism to appropriate. When we were made aware of the fact that there was this difference between the current payment on TAF for the bond, the $56 million bond, and what the payments would be in the upcoming 2011 years and subsequent years, we realized that there would be sufficient amount of money there in trying to amortize a $20 million loan. The annual payment on an amortized $20 million loan would be about $1.3 million, $1.4 million annually. We've spoken to the Good Committee on Appropriations Chair, and I see him coming in, about the utilization of some of these funds. And we've come to an understanding about the utilization of the difference in the bond payment from the 7 to the 4.5, and I think we've all come to agree that there would be sufficient amount of money there, and also for the first 2 years, the TAF would not have to put up the 1.3. Because we would get a construction loan and would only have to pay the interest on the smaller amount that had been taken out for the initial construction of the project. And so we have now addressed the issue of where to pay of the source of repayment of a $20 million loan. I think what is before this body at this point is that we have to make a decision on whether or not the investment in a loan for $20 million to build a museum is an appropriate use of the Tourist Attraction Fund. And I would posit, Madam Speaker, that it is the most appropriate use of Tourist Attraction Fund money. The Tourist Attraction Fund money is money raised by the hotel occupancy tax for the very purpose of doing this kind of thing. Unfortunately, over the past several years, TAF has been utilized for various other things, and some of it not tourist related. In this year's budget, there was even an attempt to utilize it for school lunches. We've had to use it to pay for cleaning bathrooms, cleaning roadways, because the DPW budget has not been sufficient to meet the contractual needs or the operational needs of DPW to meet those. The Committee on Tourism has had no objection to the utilization of those funds because that is still maintenance of the tourist attraction destination, Guam. And but it is the consensus and in fact the unanimous consensus of the Committee on Tourism that these funds, the $1.3 million from the Tourist Attraction Fund to pay for the USDA loan, is the perfect utilization for the Tourist Attraction Fund in the building of a museum. It will do two things, Madam Chair. It will further the discussion, which unfortunately we shortcut on addressing our culture. It really is imperative that our children have a place that they can go to where they can see and understand from whence they came. I'm sorry I wasn't here yesterday, Madam Speaker, but I understand that all of you were discussing a bill on trying to promote Chamorro language. The Institute, the museum, will have the educational facilities to be able to do that. They have plans that there may even be an immersion, Chamorro immersion school within the facility. There may be a dance facility in there. The museum will be able to get out of storage all the boxes and boxes, the hundreds and thousands of boxes that are currently rotting in warehouses, so that our children can proudly see what we have as a heritage that we can be proud of. I was down at the Lieutenant Governor's office the other day, and he has a beautiful display that used to be at the museum of a lot of the sling stones. And he has the display there because he likes to joke when he has off-island visitors come in to show them that actually football originated on Guam, because the sling stone looks like a football, and the engineering of it is perfect for its projectile needs. And so, but we still have thousands of boxes that are in warehouses throughout the island and need to be displayed somewhere. And I think a museum would do it. The Museum Foundation has also done an analysis of how much money they think they might be able to raise annually when the museum is open. And they're anticipating that conservatively they should be able to raise almost $900,000 a year in admission fees, which would greatly reduce the need for the TAF funds, but the TAF funds would still be the guarantee to make sure that if for some reason the projection of revenue by fees is not sufficient, that there would still be every year $1.3 million to pay for the bond. And I think, Madam Speaker, we have shown with the $56 million bond repayment that the TAF fund has been a great source of revenue. I mean, straight off the top, the complaint at GVB has always been every month the bond is paid before anything else is done. And if there isn't sufficient money after the bond is paid, then nothing else happens. But fortunately, even in our worst year, there has been sufficient funds for other operations, including funding other things that aren't related to tourist attraction facilities. And so, Madam Speaker, I'm asking that our colleagues, and I want to thank the Committee on Rules for allowing us to substitute the bill. I want to thank the Committee on Senator Frank Ogden's Committee on Economic Development for having heard 179 and not having any objections to us substituting the bill in Committee on Rules. And I want to thank the Chairman on Committee on Appropriations, Chairman Pangilinan, for agreeing that this is a good utilization of funds, building a revenue-generating facility that will enhance destination Guam, will provide, but more importantly than enhancing tourist destination Guam, it will give our children and our people a place that they can be proud of. It can be something they can point to and they can see that houses my culture, that houses my history, that building houses, and I can learn about my culture and my history at that place up in Agana Heights where this is going to be. And so, Madam Speaker, I ask that this body, having accepted Substitute Bill 179, pass Bill 179 and support the idea of building this museum. I want to apologize that I've been away for the last 3 weeks, and I've been negotiating this by email. And let me tell you, it's been in the middle of the night that I've been doing much of my emailing back and forth with the office, trying to negotiate these things and trying to get everybody on board. But I want to apologize to Senator Frank Bloss because we were supposed to have amended the sponsorship of the bill to include him as one of the main sponsors, because you and I both had separate museum bills, and all three had been heard and they had been held up because of funding sources, and it wasn't any attempt to try to pull all the credit for this. This is a joint effort that has that took 3 chairs to try to move through 4 chairs with the Committee on Rules to allow for a substitution this late in the game. But I'd like to, if Senator Frank Blas would have no objection to listing him as one of the main sponsors of the bill.
Vice Speaker, how would the succession of the sponsorship be?
He has no problems with listing as 4th.
On that motion, to have Senator Blas as the 4th. On that motion, without objection.
Madam Chair, I also have one other amendment, and because of the fact that we were doing this via email, on page 4,
the bill that we're working on, Senators, is Bill number 30-179 COR as substituted by the Committee on Economic Development, Health and Human Services and Judiciary, and further substituted by the Committee on Rules. Is that the right bill that we're working on? It's in the committee report. Yeah. I'm just going to take a 10-second recess. Sergeant of Arms, does everybody have their copy? Legislature's back in session. Vice Speaker Cruz, you still have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I guess the Museum Foundation has shown up. And anyway, Madam Speaker, there is an amendment that I'd like to make on page 4. Since we're working on this bill from when it was a Section 30 bill, something didn't get taken out that needs to be taken out at this point. On page 4, starting on line 4, I'd like to delete the 3 words submission to jurisdiction on line 4, and then delete the last sentence on that paragraph starting on line 9 through 11. The government hereby submits jurisdiction to federal district court for the purposes because this bill originally, when it was going to be the USDA loan, needed to get approved by the district court. And I didn't catch that
Okay.
initially. So
On the,
if there's no objection, those 3 words on line 4 and the 3-line sentence at the bottom, line 9 to 11, if there's no objection, I'd like to delete.
okay, on that motion? No objection, motion carries. Clerk,
Madam
since you
Speaker, one other amendment on the first page of the bill. I think there's been question as to whether or not this is a general obligation bond or a limited general obligation bond. And with the help of those of you that know more about bonds, obligations, is it a general or a limited? If it's a limited, I would like to make the motion that we amend the title and make
The
it
caption.
limited. It's a limited what?
The motion on the floor, Senators, is to delete the word general on the caption, and it would be relative to obtaining a limited obligation loan.
Okay. The suggestion is that I leave that to everybody, let everybody else speak on the need for this museum. I just want to thank all of you for, I know you and Senator Bloss. Senator Bloss, I think the 2 of you introduced museum bills long before I did, and there was just issues of funding, and at the end we just kind of thought that this was going to be the best way to sneak it in the last minute. And there is one thing, Madam Speaker, it's imperative that we pass this by this weekend because USDA needs to know by the 15th that this is done and that they have that we're going to be setting aside TAF money for the repayment of the loan. And I think some of you will see on the displays that the Museum Foundation has brought the design that has been that won the award for the design, and the importance of this is going to have to the education of our children and also for the edification of the tourists that come to Guam. But I think the primary purpose that we should be concerned about here is the fact that it is going to be a means by which we can educate our children and future generations about their roots and their culture, their identity, and at the same time provide something that Guam has needed in the tourism industry for a very long time, and that is a museum that the tourists can go to so that they can understand. All the recent studies that GVB has been doing is showing that a lot of our tourists now on Guam are the gray travelers, my age that don't dye their hair, and so that they're the ones that have the extra cash to come, but they want something that's educational, that's cultural, and it's imperative that if Guam is to remain a world-class tourist destination, it has to have a museum. I just got back from a trip to Germany, and I can assure you, this one little city had 6 museums in it. And so I'm hoping that with the support of all of my colleagues here, that Guam will finally give birth to a major museum here on Guam. And so I ask for all of your support, and I ask for the ability to be able to come back and correct the title once council gives me the heads up as to what it should be called. Again, I thank you and Senator Blas for being at the forefront of pushing this issue of a museum. I want to thank the chairs for allowing for the substitution in the hearings and supporting this. This has been a collaborative effort of many people, including the First Lady, who is, let me tell you, has been moving mountains to try to get everybody online with this one. And so I want to thank her publicly for her support, and the Museum Foundation for all that they've been doing to try to get this through. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to pass this week and get USDA to give us the loan in the next month, and get this thing, get the ground broken on this one at the earliest possible date. Again, I thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on 179 as substituted and as further substituted by the Committee on Rules.
Si Diyos Masi, Vice Speaker Cruz, I know that there are several people who want to speak on the main motion of the bill, and I have it in the line of succession: Frank Blas, Frank Uggan, Judy Guthertz, Eddie Calvo, and myself. Is there anyone else wishing? Please let me know. At this time, I will recognize Frank Blas.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the good senator from PD, and through his collaboration and his leadership, along with the good chairs of the different committees that have somewhat jurisdiction over the bill, in being able to come up with a product now that we can deliberate and discuss, and hopefully at the end of the day is the end goal here is to build the institute, our institute and our museum. Madam Speaker, I think you can recall that when you and I went to DC last year, one of the major discussions we had was with the USDA, and one of the main purposes of meeting with them was to continue to discuss how we can utilize the resources that could be made available to us through many mechanisms to be able to construct a museum. And as a result of that collaboration, as well as continued discussions with the Guam Museum Foundation, in working with them, first off, my earlier bill 50-30 COR, was a collaboration and was a discussion with the Museum Foundation, and I'm glad to see that this bill here, as substituted, has the same framework and the same intentions, which is why I believe that, and again I want to thank the good senator from PD in, the continued discussions that he had with the four of us, Senator Spicio, yourself, and I, on crafting a bill that, and granted and recognizing that, there's going to be some discussion with regards to how we're going to be able to fund this, how we're going to be able to build this, but it's a discussion. It's a discussion we need to have now, and it's a discussion that has to pull through, because in a couple of weeks, we've got to make a determination. We've got to give our commitment to some individuals on whether or not this thing would go through. And I remember in one of in the discussions with USDA, one of the concerns they had was that we had to make sure that there were certain parameters and certain things that this institute, this museum, would have to be able to provide. And along those lines, not to belabor any further discourse, is on page 5, line 16, is one of the concerns and one of the things that USDA wanted to ensure that we provide is an educational component to the facility that's going to be built. And so on page 5, line 16, after the word preservation, put a comma and then add the word education. So that line would read, designed to assist in furthering the preservation, comma, education, and presentation of Guam's culture, heritage, and history.
On that motion, anyone else wish to speak on it? Are there any objections? No objections? Motion carries.
Thank
Senator
you,
Blas.
Madam Speaker. And I think, Madam Speaker, as was presented by the author in his opening remarks, there has been already a place that has been designated to be able to build this facility. And along those lines, if I can have just in your words, a 10-second recess to talk to the author whether or not it's imperative for us to be able to put the specific location as to where this is going to be built in the bill. Thank you.
10-second recess.
The legislature is back in session. Senator Blas, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to be able to, for that recess to discuss some of the issues. And, you know, I was just going to go ahead and end my presentation here by again, thanking the author and the continued collaboration of many members of this body so that we can finally see and construct our Cultural Heritage Center, a museum. You know, one of the things that I appreciate is that it for me it makes good sense, good use of our tourist attraction fund, recognizing that will be used as, for lack of a better term, the backstop, and being able to pay down the financing that's going to be needed to be able to construct this thing. I'm optimistic and I'm confident that you know, just within the vendor sales, the receipts, and the revenues that can be generated by this kind of facility over the years will be able to pay itself off. So this is something that's this is an investment worth investing into, and I encourage and I please my colleagues to please support this legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Blas. Senator Uggan is not here. Senator Guthertz on the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The first thing I want to do is to commend Senator Cruz, Senator Tina Rose Munoz Barnes, and Senator Frank Blas. Because over the last few years, these folks have been working very hard to find the right vehicle for us to finally realize a museum on our island. And looking at this legislation, I think we have the right vehicle. We finally have the right vehicle, and we have the most appropriate funding source. You know, when I think of the Tourist Attraction Fund, and when people in our community talk to me about it, their biggest complaint is that we don't see very much from that fund directly relating to we the people. We see the Tourist Attraction Fund used for promotional trips of the Guam Visitors Bureau to attract tourists to Guam, which is fine. We see the Tourist Attraction Fund used to produce real glossy and beautiful, you know, brochures and a few little CD videos or DVD videos to give out. But we don't see a lot of the tourist attraction money directly beneficial in a visible way to each and every resident of our island. Now, fortunately lately, we've seen the We Are Guam initiative, which is terrific, bringing the tourism industry right into the villages, and that's very commendable. But what's really been missing in our community is a place that would not just display, but energize the rich cultural history of the people of Guam. And I'm very enthusiastic about this. I want to see this museum built very quickly. And I want to see as quickly as possible all of the various collections in the hands of this government properly displayed with respect and with the appropriate history explaining these artifacts and these photographs and these materials that will take those that come to see it from the pre-Spanish period on Guam all the way to the present. We have nothing like that now. You know, I remember a few years ago, fortunately, the Micronesian Mall donated some space to the Guam Museum, and they had some display there of some artifacts. And it was something that the tourists would go and look at while they were shopping at the Micronesian Mall. It was a very small collection and a very small space, but that's all we had. And we really haven't had anything since then. I remember when the museum collection was behind the administration building in Agania when Ricky Berdalia was governor. It was a small building. That's all we had at that time. Right now, we don't have anything. All we have is a lot of hardworking people, a lot of volunteers associated with the Museum Foundation trying their very best to realize this dream. And it's not just their dream, it's the dream, I believe, of all the people of Guam, particularly our young people, our youth. My goodness, colleagues, can you imagine what it would be like for each and every student in Guam to be able to go on a field trip from their school to the Guam Museum to see their history before their very eyes? Can you imagine the respect that would be inculcated in these young people for the rich Chamorro culture and the rich cultures of the diverse population we have that has become part of our island? I believe it would have a direct impact on how they see their future and how they respect their land and their people and everything about Guam. This museum is very important. We cannot afford to wait any longer. We are about to face one of the biggest changes that will affect everybody's life here for decades to come, and that's the military buildup. And one of the biggest concerns we have about the buildup is the potential loss of an identity for the Chamorro people and all the people of Guam. Because of the immense increase in population that's going to come, the transplanting of people from the U.S. mainland and from other places who do not have an understanding of the culture of the people of Guam and may not have the time or interest to learn. The military is projecting now maybe 41,000 more people by 2014. Of course, you and I know it could be much higher with migration from other places. That's not directly related to the buildup, but is an aside development from the buildup. People coming here looking for jobs and opportunities. We cannot afford to dilute the specialness of Guam. We cannot afford to dilute the history of Guam, the institutions of Guam, the sacrifices of the people of Guam over every period of its history. And having a properly designed and administered and funded museum facility will help us ensure that the culture and the traditions that we all hold dear here will live on far beyond us or those that come after us. Now, I want to show something to you, my colleagues, that's part of Guam's history. And I'd like to ask our page to please assist, if you wouldn't mind, sort of to pick it up and bring it over here, and be very careful because it's very delicate. And I want our friends from the Museum Foundation to see this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is something that I rescued, which was about to be thrown away 7 years ago. No. This is one of the armadillos that Governor Daniels brought to Guam when he was the appointed governor of Guam, appointed by President Kennedy. If you know Guam's history, you know that Governor Daniels was a real character. But one of the things he did is he wanted to raise cattle on Guam to help promote our economy, and he brought some animal that's very unique to Texas called an armadillo. He brought about 22 armadillos to Guam. I was just a little girl, very, very small girl, but I remember the controversy of the armadillos. Governor Daniels had the armadillos fenced in at Government House, up the hill at Government House. And the workers at Government House were afraid of this animal. They'd never seen anything like it. They were afraid that somehow it would propagate on Guam and become a dangerous thing for the community.
Senator, can you please address the,
So one night,
and can he put it down
Yes.
on your desk
please
now?
put on my desk,
Yes,
please, so
thank
you don't drop it. It's
Yes.
heavy. Yes, okay. So
And
one
address-
night,
and address the chair,
Okay.
exactly, thank you.
Madam Speaker, one night what happened was, while Governor Daniels was asleep up at Government House, his armadillos got stolen. All the armadillos were stolen. And if you go back and look at the old Guam Daily News, there's a whole story about this. Armadillos missing from Government House. Some person or group of persons gathered up all the armadillos from the pen that Governor Daniels had made and took away the armadillos because they were afraid of these animals, that somehow they were going to hurt the island and our people. They were never recovered. But 7 years ago, I got a tip, actually from a relative here, through marriage, that there was a family about to leave Guam, who was from Guam, that had this peculiar looking thing at their house that they were going to throw away. And this person said, you know, Auntie Judy, this is a very strange looking thing, and I think you should look at it because it's very funny. I've never seen anything like it. I said, okay, bring it over. And when he brought it over to me, I immediately realized what it was. I contacted this family, which I will not name, before they left the island, and I talked to the father in the household who told me that his father worked at Government House. No, his father worked at Government House, and that this was something the father kept sort of behind the house as a souvenir. And you can put the rest together. Anyway, so I decided that this is something that should be part of Guam's history. It is part of Guam's history. During the presidentially appointed governorship on the island of Governor Daniels. And I had the case made, and I told myself, when Guam has an appropriate museum that's non-political, non-partisan, and can continue despite whoever governor is or whatever administration is in office, then I will donate this to the museum. And I'll write up the history of how this was found. Because that's where this should be. And there's many other people in our community that probably have other things that they know and they would like to be in a real, bona fide, well-administered, protected, non-political museum. And that's where this is going to go. I support, Madam Speaker, this bill. I support the funding source from the Tourist Attraction Fund. It is a totally legitimate source of funding the Guam Museum because it will promote Guam to the tourists will enjoy it, the tourist buses will go to the museum, and so will our people. So I'm very honored and happy to support this, and I want to commend Senator Cruz, again, Senator Tina Monia Barnes for her efforts, the Speaker, and also Senator Frank Bloss, and all my colleagues who I hope will vote for this bill. It's time for the museum. We can't afford to wait any longer. If you want Guam's culture to be respected and understood, and to educate those that are going to come to live and call Guam their home, we need our museum now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Gutherts. On the motion, Senator Calvo, you're recognized.
Thank you very
Do
much.
you also have a show and tell?
Oh, yes, I'll get to that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, how do you speak after a presentation such as that? But I can tell you That explains.
Senator.
You know, back, Madam Speaker, a little joke aside before I start in the seriousness of the discussion, but I do remember as a little boy, and that was about 1965, 66, we lived in Mighty where the cliff is. And, you know, something happened that we all talked about as kids, and now I figured it out. After looking at that stuffed armadillo, I do remember as a kid, this big hairless rat with a skin condition running up our backyard. I finally figured out what happened to some of the armadillos. Madam Speaker, again, I rise in support of this legislation. Again, there is so much dynamic change that will be occurring in this island over the next few years. It is so important that we not only protect, but we enhance and strengthen what makes Guam so unique, and that is our culture and that's our history. You know, I was blessed to have an uncle named Monsignor Pali Oscar Calvo, and in my younger years, I had an opportunity to visit him and his family at his residence in Agania Heights, and every so often we'd go in there and go into his library and talk about the immense wealth of history that we have in this island. It was just in his library. Whether it was an artifact from Father Duenas, as recent as Father Duenas, or even a crucifix from Pali Sanvitoris' time. Obviously, for Polly Scott, most of his focus was on the post-Magellan phase of Guam's history, and in particular to the areas after Sanvitoris. But Guam, and the history of Guam, it goes back much farther than that. And I look at some of the artifacts that we have currently stored in many myriad of places here on Guam, some even in the States or in Hawaii, and it's so important that we have to bring it back home. There's a card, a tablet over there that says 3,500 years of history needs a home. And I've got a little card I pulled out as well. I don't know if you can see it there, but it might be a little bit too small. But I pulled that and I asked the representatives from the Guam Museum Foundation if I could show this. In one area you have here, it looks like shards of pottery. And then of course I asked the question how old that is. These shards of pottery that show fine detail go back 3,500 years. Then of course you have here, and I'm not too sure if these are the sling stones, or are they some more for fishing, but they look like the sling stones used. You know, there is discussions on whether it was 3,500 years or 4,000 years ago. But in the context of history, that time period falls into the period when Abraham, the father of Christianity and Islam and Judaism, that was the period in history when he made his journey from Ur to the Promised Land. That's how far back Guam history goes. It's amazing. It's amazing. And some of this pottery, which goes back again 3 to 4 millennia, that's a rich history. I have a pari, and of course he says that, I'm sure in a joking manner, but he's always talked about the sling stone and its age, and he says, thank goodness for the Chamorro, because if it wasn't for the Chamorro, David would have had a tough time slaying Goliath. That sling stone, in his opinion, was created by the Chamorro. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm talking about history of our island, history that goes back thousands of years. It's so important as a people that we do not lose this to the dustbin of history. I'm supportive of this bill. I'm asking for my colleagues' support. I did want to, of course, ask a question if if the author of the bill can defer to a question by mine, and the question is quite simple. I'm for it, by the way. It's just I want to make sure that, does he have the support of the governor, lieutenant governor on this?
I think more importantly, we have the support of the First Lady, so I'm sure we'll.
Okay, and I just want to be, and I think I'm going to be supportive of this bill, whether it's signed by the governor, lieutenant governor, or not. But obviously that is a valid question, because as I see this USDA loan, and I see it $20 million and a 5% interest rate ceiling, it's just quite ironic that we had a USDA loan at 3.75 not too long ago, and if you add the 15 million, an effective rate of down to 3.25, and of course with that piece of legislation that would have gone to, and of course I want to congratulate my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, because those bills would have gone for those loans to fix our hospital and our schools. And again, I was in favor of that loan, and of course I'm in favor of this. I just wanted to get a clarity if the administration is sold on this, because I am. I think this is worth the investment of our people. This is something not for just this generation's, but the generations to come. So, my dear Speaker, and to the authors of this bill, you have my full support, and I'm asking my colleagues for their support as well as the administration as well. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Calvo. On the list, I also have Senator Ada. Okay. Yes, I have. Okay. I have Senator Ada, Barnes, Respicio, Pangilinan, Espodon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in support of Bill 179. You know, I've listened to my colleagues speak, the good senator from PD, about how he went to Europe and saw the history there, how they have 7 museums in just one city alone. It just goes to show that when you can talk and live history all over again, you can bring your culture back to life. And that's what it's all about, is unboxing our heritage and our culture and bringing it back to life. Bringing it back to where we, the people, our children, our grandchildren, can enjoy what heritage and richness of what we are and who we are from back when, 3,500 years ago. And having an edifice, a museum of sort, to house this heritage is truly important, because I think that once we start to understand how others can appreciate and they're proud of their culture and their heritage, that we will be able to move forward and have such a magnificent place to house our heritage. History, you know, you can read it in the books. You can try and understand it by someone else telling the story. But when you can actually see it see it for yourself, touch it, learn about it, it has a whole different meaning to it. Back when I was in the military, I was a part of history back in Europe when the Berlin Wall came down. And I've taken a part of that Berlin Wall and I brought it back here. And every time my children go to school and they have show and tell, I take a part of that history with them and I take it to the school and I show them what it was about Europe in the time of war. What separated people, their own people, from each other. It was a wall, a barrier, where one brother couldn't talk to a sister, a mother couldn't talk to a son because of this wall. And it showed the importance of how these kids could understand the true meaning of history, because they understood it not only in their history books, but when they saw it and they felt it, they felt what kind of history it was. They couldn't believe that concrete made by man actually separated man. So having this museum will only be able to have our children learn about our history. 3,500 years is a lot of history, and we still have many to uncover. But at least we can unbox it and put it in a place where it truly belongs with respect and dignity. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Ada. Senator Respicio, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today seems like a continuation of yesterday. And I was also fascinated by how our session was yesterday, where many of us stood up and tried to support a bill, and it prompted us to speak in Chamorro. And as we know, some of our colleagues are more fluent than others, but nonetheless, all of us are very proud Chamorros, and we're very Banidoso. We're very Banidoso because we have such a rich culture and heritage, but why can't we be just as proud to say that $20 million will be money well spent to showcase our true Chamorro culture and our resilience as a people over time. I certainly rise in support of Bill 179-30, and I also join in the accolades to commend the Vice Speaker for sponsoring this bill, Senator Barnes, Senator Blas, yourself, the oversight chairs of the various committees. And as we go through a stroll down memory lane in what we've tried to do over the years to make this Guam Museum a reality, I want to just share with you and our colleagues that in the 27th Guam Legislature, Senator Barnes and I introduced a bill that will just simply add $3 a day to the hotel occupancy tax and pledge this money to be dedicated for strict use to build the Guam Museum. And I bring this up, Madam Speaker, because it seems like we're coming full circle, and although we're not adding additional dollars to the daily tourist attraction fund or the hotel occupancy tax, which eventually is used as a tourist attraction fund, which fills the tourism industry's need to promote Guam. You know, I was chastised specifically by the Hotel and Restaurant Association and the entire tourism industry by saying, if you add an additional $3 to the hotel occupancy rate, you're going to deter tourists from wanting to come to Guam. When we ran the numbers, Madam Speaker, it would only mean an additional $7 for a Japanese couple stay here on Guam. If you take a Japanese tourist length of stay on Guam, and you factor that into that bill that we proposed back then, it would not mean average more than $7 per tourist that comes here. And then we look over the years, and yourself and Senator Spadan and I are members of APIL. And every time we go to the other islands for these APIL events, what happens when we leave their airports? We're asked to pay a departure tax. And some are as high as $25, $35, thank you, per passenger. Some range for $20, I believe, in the case of Palau.
No, 35 now.
Palau went up 35?
It just increased.
Last time I was there, it was $20. Now you're submitting to us that it's $35. And I remember when we were in Kiribati, and they don't take U.S. dollars. I remember us scrambling to try to find money in their currency to be able to pay our exit tax. But there are other options that certainly can be used. And I'm very, very happy that the Tourist Attraction Fund will be a repayment source for this multi-million-dollar loan. I'm very happy that it seems like the industry has come around to embrace this idea, because back in the 27th Guam Legislature, we're seeing statistics from tourists, the departure statistics that showed that the one thing the tourists really, really want, but they're not getting right now, is being exposed to the culture of that community that they're visiting. And so in our case, we really have not been able to do that. But in the case of Bill 179, we will be, and over time, I want to recognize the efforts of the Guam Museum Foundation. I want to recognize David Tydinko and his group, and the Vice Speaker mentioned the First Lady and how active she's been. But I want to say that this idea has transcended past administrations, and this idea should transcend future administrations, because you cannot say that this has to be one party's initiative over the other. Our culture has to survive this over time, and we have to have a true ability to make this revenue generating. And if done right, Madam Speaker, I believe that we wouldn't have to tap into the existing resource, the TAF, and that this could really be a moneymaker. I also want to commend the movers of this bill to recognize the resources that are available to through USDA, and how this low-interest loan certainly could be used and is going to be used to fund this project. As you know, we've also been committed to rebuilding the old legislature, and the legislature currently has an application before USDA to borrow some monies and use the money that we get from the monthly post office rent, as well as some savings we would realize by restructuring our housing needs and converting that to services loans. So you're seeing a huge movement to beautify and restore Hagåtña to how it was. And I want to tell the Guam Museum Foundation and the executive branch that the legislature continues to be a partner in that, and we're going to find ways to make sure that that historical landmark, we call it the old legislature building, certainly is going to be a part of that whole revitalization effort. So I rise in full support of this bill. I believe that if done right, it will be revenue generating. I believe that our tourists now are going to be able to get a good taste of what all of we are as a people, and how this museum will truly reflect that. So I'm signing up as a supporter of this bill, and I want to again commend everyone, and hope that this will be the final leg in our journey to really have a house to showcase our culture and really highlight the resiliency of our people over time. So thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Espicio. The chair recognizes Senator Pangilinan on the motion.
Just want to see, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, you know, for many years, of course, we've had a Guam Museum, if you could call it that.
Sit on.
And you know, we had something, and it wasn't and isn't appropriate really for the pride that we have in our people and our history and our culture. And we wanted, and searched for many years, to try and find a mechanism, a vehicle to support something that befits our history as a people, our pride, that will show the rest of the world and our visitors. And for many, many years, we've tried to convince people that when we do something for our visitors, most especially in the area of showcasing our culture, we do it for ourselves first, and our visitors get the benefit of the pride that we display in ourselves. And for many years, we fought outside interests with regards to where and how we pay for this display of our pride. I remember many times talking about, well, isn't it proper? Wouldn't it be appropriate? Doesn't it support the visitor industry if we take the revenues from the visitor industry, reinvest it in ourselves, that benefits our visitors, that gives them something more than sun, sand, and shopping, or as our good Vice Speaker used to say, we have to face it up to the fact that for the longest time it was sand, sun, and sex with regards to why these people come to Guam with those facilities available at Tumon and along Marine Corps Drive. And we kind of turned our eye and winked at the last part of that. And we're doing something about that also. So really, this body has decided that no matter how controversial, no matter how divided the community is, when you put it out in the open and you discuss it and you come to a decision, then we'll move past it. And that contentious atmosphere that's created by airing these things that we've kind of winked at or turned our blind eye to, that once we resolve those issues and we put them out there and we address them, then it becomes a place for us to unite and move forward. And so I remember proposing many times and talking to many members of our community about a museum, and shouldn't the tourist attractions fund it? Oh, no, you shouldn't. That's meant for tourism. That's meant for us to go and advertise in Japan. That's meant for us to fix the sewer in Tumon. That's meant for us, all meant to support the tourism industry. And it's their money. And that it's not the people's money. It's not the government's money. For many, many years, we've had that huge fight. And we get attacked whenever we say we should use money from the tourist attraction fund even to fix Ipao Beach. We had a huge fight in terms of when we borrowed the infrastructure loan to increase the sewer pipes so that the hotels doesn't have sewer backups. For many years when we said, and we're going to take a little bit of that and put it in Ipao, and boy, did we get attacked. Because no, that's our money. It's only to, it should only support the hotels. It should only put red bricks down there or yellow brick road down there. And never mind, the road in Yumarak or Maleso when the tourist bus drives by and it's bumpy and potholes. No, just fix Tumon and everything will be okay. So it is nice to see. And I'm sure that maybe they're just not as vocal now, but I'm sure there's people down there that are saying, there they go again, taking our money and putting it into their people. Well, what's wrong with that? And I remember I used to say, but hey, wasn't the slogan and the PR, tourism, what's in it for me? Remember that slogan? And they showed, waiters and waitresses and chambermaids or, housekeepers. Tourism, what's in it for me? Well, tourism, what's in it for me? A museum. Don't you think that's better for tourism? That's better in getting the local people to support, the economic activity that's created down there? And don't these hotels, one of the things that say that during the downtimes in the hotel, they relied on the local people to support the restaurants and the hotels and so forth. So it really is a partnership. And in the partnership, you got to share your profits. You got to share your money. But it's always been, no, we just want to keep all the money down here, but we want you to support us. And we always do. We do. Even though we say, shouldn't we do this? And we have a discussion, and some of us back down, some of us say, all right, keep it all. Don't worry, we'll just use it for that. We won't give any to the mayors to cut the sides of the grass so that when the tourist drives by, the roads are clean and nice. Only recently, I mean, I applaud this recent effort of this branding and we are Guam, Hita Guam, and moving tourism out of Tumon into the villages and letting our visitors experience our people. For many years, we've not reacted to that. For many, many years, I read the exit surveys every time. What do you want to see in Guam? And maybe in the times of the bubble, it was like, I just want to see cheaper Rolex in Guam than in Japan. But it's changed. The dynamics have changed. People have changed. Their wants and desires and curiosities have changed. People are now curious about who are the Chamorros? What were these people like? What did they do? How did they survive? They want to know. And if we're going to continue to rely on shopping and sand, then you don't build a foundation. Because they build a bigger shopping center somewhere else, or they find cheaper packages, they go. They're gone. They're fickle. But when you build that foundation of catering to a new generation that is interested in these things, and it won't be 10 million of them, but we don't want 10 million tourists on Guam. At least I don't. I'd like to see people come here, that get extra, just stay an extra day. Mr. Berdon Pinko, Mr. Tourism, I said, we don't need an additional 2 million tourists on Guam. That may not even be good for us. What we need is the 1 million we get today for them to just stay one more day. That's all we need. That one additional day. Is that going to be because we have a museum? It certainly will extend their day on Guam in terms of the ability to take a look at what we have and who we are and learn about us. So we don't, we may have some differing ideas of how do we benefit tourism from the tourism activity on Guam. And is it better to have 1,500 tourisms that stay 2 days, or 1.5 million that stay 3 days, or is it better to have 1 million that stay 4 days or 4.5 days? Is it the same? It's not the same. It really isn't the same. So these are the things we have to take a look at. And what does the museum have to do with this? It makes it a better place to visit, a more interesting place to visit, much more importantly, a more unique place to visit. And when you cater to those things, then you have a much more solid base than somebody who's looking for cheap shopping and a quick getaway. Not that we don't need those tourists, because those tourists, all are part of the mix. But what is going to be sustainable? And that really is the key. And when you improve your infrastructure, of which are part of them are the sites and the activities, when you improve that infrastructure, you improve your sustainability as a destination. And I think a museum contributes to that. And I think that's what we need and what we want. And I think it's appropriate that we take the revenues generated by our visitors, reinvest it in ourselves first, take pride in it, build our pride, and reflect that to our visitors. They will see it in the faces of our children who know and understand our history and our culture, and lifts them up. We all walk a little taller, smile a little wider, extend our graciousness a lot more, and enhance the quality of our own lives, as well as enhance the visitor experience of our visitors. And I think that's, to me, is what is being offered in this bill. And Madam Speaker, not only do we need to build this up, and by building this museum, that helps, I think we need to fix up what we have that exists now, preserve it, and showcase it. And so, with discussion from the chairman of the committee, and looking at what else we need to do and the opportunity presented by this vehicle, I wanted to make an amendment to the bill. And no, I think we need to make copies, Madam Speaker. So if I could just have a minute
So
recess.
we're going to take a minute recess. Senator Pangilinan, you may continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the amendment I propose has been passed out, and it would be to amend Section A, and that would be to increase the amount from 20 million to 25 million, up to, not to exceed 25 million, for the purpose of paying the cost of the acquisition, construction, equipping of the Guam Institute of Cultural Heritage and Natural History, and this is the addition, and the preservation and rehabilitation of the Plaza de España and other structures within the plaza. Now, Madam Speaker, you know, the Plaza de España is one of our most visited sites, and it's a small part of our history, but it certainly is an important part of our history, the Spanish era of our history. And we have, of course, the plaza there with some of the structures. We have the azotea, the old remnants of an old building there that used to house the Guam Museum itself. And these structures have deteriorated over the years, and we really haven't invested in the rehabilitation of the Plaza de España itself. And I think that this is a good vehicle. My conversation with the good committee chair and his staff is that USDA will entertain something above that as long as it's invested in facilities and infrastructure. And of course, the Plaza de España being, again, like I said, one of my most visited sites and needs an upgrade and a facelift, would be included as being an eligible project and construction and rehabilitation should we get this loan for the purpose of constructing our museum. And so that's the first amendment.
Can we just bifurcate this and do this one first and then move on to the next, or is it critical that they all fall
It's all the
together?
same.
Okay,
It's all the
right.
same. One says we have approved this, increase in the amount for this purpose, and then the other one just says would be almost technical in that the use of the proceeds would then
okay.
go
I see.
to support this as a second item on the loan. Okay.
Okay, so on the motion, two hands instead of one. Senator Cabo, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe that this amendment also, it touches not just on historical significance, but also it's a health and safety factor. Not too long ago, my kids were playing in that area, and there was some of the tiles that actually just fell off the azotea area. And when I looked at it, just looked how dangerous that particular area is. And if you can recall what happened in Liberation Day, just this past Liberation Day festivities, where they had a tree fall and actually kill, one woman was killed and a couple others were injured. Thank goodness nothing has happened to this point in the azotea area, but that place, from all appearances, is dangerous. I know they've tried to put some blockading tape around that area, but it's someone could walk in there, and we could have a potential crisis here. So again, I believe that this particular amendment is not only an issue dealing with historical preservation and guarding our history, but also guarding the lives of our young people. Especially now, we have schools that just started, and we have the academy there, and then of course we have the school buses that pick up kids and drop them, both in the morning hours and in the afternoon hours. So, Madam Speaker, again, this is significant to the point that it also has an issue dealing with the health and safety of our people. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Cavo. Senator Respicio, you recognize on the amendment.
I just want to quickly rise to support the amendment and thank our good Appropriations Chair, Speaker Pangilinan, for this kind of amendment that looks to seek some kind of financing to piggyback off of this Guam Museum project, and to recognize that the Azotea area is certainly part of the historic restoration of the whole Hagåtña and the historic route. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're having some success in trying to get also a USD loan to partner with the Historic Preservation Trust grant that this legislature has already been approved to restore the old legislature building. And so, as a good mover of the amendment has mentioned, this Azotea area needs to be addressed as well. And as you know, Madam Speaker, the Vice Speaker has continually challenged us in his oversight capacity as tourism chair to say if we can't maintain the buildings which the legislature has jurisdiction over, then either we assign it to the executive branch or we figure out a way to restore it. And I think this amendment speaks to that effort. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Respicio. On the amendment, there being no objection from anyone, so the amendment then carries. Senator Pangilinan, you still have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other amendment I have, and I know we've spoken about it, but I don't think the formal amendment have been made, and that would be to appropriately recognize this debt instrument. And this debt instrument would not be termed as a general obligation debt. It would be termed as a limited obligation debt. When debt is issued secured by a revenue outside of the general fund, in this case the tourist attraction fund from the hotel taxes, the proper designation for the financing would be that it becomes a limited obligation of the government of Guam, pledged or secured by the tourist attraction fund. So I wanted to make a general amendment that would change references to general obligation in the bill to be termed appropriately as limited obligation debt of the government of Guam secured by the tourist attraction fund, and make that amendment for the legal counsel to make those appropriate changes throughout the bill.
So to make sure then we understand your amendment is that everywhere then where it talks about a general obligation debt, that it be then instead changed to a limited obligation debt. Okay,
Right.
An example of that would be like in page 3, line
Correct.
24, additional limited obligation debt rather
Correct.
than general.
Yes.
Does everybody understand the amendment then? Are there any objections? No objections, and so ordered.
Thank you. The other concern I have, the one concern I have with this bill, Madam Speaker, is I really, we talk about what we're building, and we're building the Guam Museum. That's my understanding. And the reference to this Institute of Cultural Heritage and Natural History, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know the legal structure of this, if this is a legal structure, if there's an existing entity that is now vested with the rights and privileges of the Guam Museum based upon incorporating this language in here. So I am concerned about that. I want to build the Guam Museum that reflects, of course, primarily the history of the people of the land. So if we're saying it's the cultural heritage, how about, is it the Chamorro cultural heritage? Is it the Spanish cultural heritage? Is it the, what heritage does this entity focus on? And for me, the heritage that makes us unique is the Chamorro heritage. And is this entity going to be reflective of that? Or because we're now saying it's only the Guam Institute of Cultural Heritage, are they now able to go in and you know, the Chamorro heritage, part of this cultural heritage is 1,000 square feet, and the Spanish is going to be 10,000 square feet, and the Japanese area is going to be 5,000 square feet? I'm really concerned about that because I don't understand it. And maybe it's very clear in somebody's mind, in somebody's plan, in somebody's vision. But if I'm going to approve $20 million or $25 million for this purpose, then I want to see what that vision is. I want to understand it. I want to buy into it. So the reference to, in this statute, to this Guam Institute of Cultural Heritage and Natural History, does that now, you know, give carte blanche latitude for something completely different than what I envision as approving to be built and what would be housed and what would be displayed? And I don't want to dictate any of that, but I want to know what is there. So is this the Guam Museum? Is this the Guam Museum Foundation? Is this the Guam Institute of Cultural Heritage? Who is this? Who is it and what is it?
Senator, would you like someone
so
here
I
to
would-
respond to your
Yes,
question?
I'd like to you know, kind of get some kind of explanation for this. And is this the proper designation? Is this the proper vehicle to legitimize or legalize or give authority to this institute outside of the government of Guam? Is it even a GovGuam entity? So I'd like to get those clarifications made, I think, prior to the vote on this bill, at least for my sake.
Will the Vice Speaker, the primary sponsor, then be able to respond to his question?
I can probably respond to some of it, Madam Speaker, but I know that the Department of Chamorro Affairs is here. The CAHA is also here. Both, it's under both of their jurisdictions, and also the chairman of the Museum Foundation. It's a combined effort. This whole thing is actually based out of the Department of Chamorro Affairs office at the DNA building. It's all part of the administration's effort. It is an executive branch effort by two departments and a nonprofit. All three of them are there, and if we want, we can invite them in. I mean, this is an appropriation bill, and if we want to resolve into the committee of the whole, I'm sure that they could.
Better yet,
Or
because
either that-
there is another meeting this afternoon in about 5 minutes that I think it'll be a good time to take a recess.
I know everybody's here if
And
everybody
while
wants to
they're
go out
there,
and
so
speak.
that-
The plans are outside of what they're planning on building. They have all the personnel from the Department of Chamorro Affairs, Council of the Arts and Humanities are also here to both answer questions. The officers are on both boards, and so if anybody wants some answers, they could probably give answers better than I can.
Madam Speaker, if I may point of information on this one.
State your point of information.
Thank you. To my limited knowledge, and I have limited knowledge in terms of why the shift from the Guam Museum, as I understand it, the terms of the USDA loan that we're seeking on this basically is almost part of the loan, because the requirements on the loan is that this has got to be an educational facility, basically. And so it's not so much the sake of a museum or anything else, it's more for an educational thing in which we would be able to acquire financing through the USDA. So, and again, I know that's only a partial answer, but the shift in terms of from the nomenclature of the Guam Museum to the cultural heritage designation basically is one of those things that really allows us access to the financing of the monies under the USDA. Thank you, Madam
Thank you
Speaker.
very much, Senator Espadon. Mr. Vice Speaker?
Yes, Madam Speaker. For the last 5 years, the foundation has been trying to find money. At one point, it was even going to be a transportation museum because they thought the DOT was going to be the one that was going to be and we were going to do a whole history of the sailboats and I mean the Suckman and everything. If that was going to be the focus, and to the credit of the Museum Foundation, they've not been sort of tunneled in just saying one thing. They try to make it as expansive as possible in the hopes that whoever wants to pay the dance card will get the dance. And the USDA wanting an education provision, I want to thank Senator Bloss for including that because that was the way to be able to get this in there.
I tell you what, because we do have this meeting in about 4 minutes, is that we're going to take a recess to allow you and Senator Pangilinan and the others as well to try to get the information or decide if we should go into committee of the whole this afternoon when we come in at 2 o'clock. So
Madam
we
Speaker,
are recessed until
point of information before going to recess. I just got a call from one of my staff and basically to address the concern of the good speaker from Barrigada. And if the concern is perhaps including the word Chamorro in there someplace in front of the Institute of Chamorro Cultural Heritage, according to the the communication that was made with USDA just over the past minute or two, they have no problem with that. So if an amendment if there is an amendment to be made to include the word Chamorro, because it's a valid concern, then that is definitely within the purview of this legislation.
Yes, and thank you for that information. But you're right. There are more questions to Senator Pangalinan's. More questions than just the name. So it'll be the best time is to just go ahead and recess for lunch, get the information you need, decide if you want to go into committee of the whole, and we can do that then when we return at 2 o'clock. So we are in recess.
Legislature's back in session. Speaker Pangilinan, you're recognized. You still have the floor. Do you wish to continue? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the discussions, of course, we broke and wanted to get the yes or no information. And what we've done is we've consulted with the individuals intimately involved with the development of the loan facility, basically which would be the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and ensuring that whatever we place within this bill as to the function of this institute, facility, would ensure that, number one, we recognize the educational component of preserving culture, advancing interests of the Chamorro people, displaying our history through the home for the artifacts and documents. And all of this is part of the what will occur in this facility that we are allowing and to be built with this loan facility, and that there's no need to be specific to any organization or institution, which ensures then that it comes to the government of Guam and the individual departments and agencies involved with the preservation, advancement, through the educational programs, outreach programs of our government, through the Department of Chamorro Affairs, CAHA, the arts, and these functions that are all integrated into the display of the culture of our people, would have that mandate, continuing that mandate, and then however it's organized after we build this facility can come at a later date. And so we're not being specific to any one organization or institution or institute for that matter, but we are very concerned and very supportive of moving forward on acquiring the necessary resources so that when we do these things, we have a place to do them out of, we have a place and a permanent home to develop and implement these programs of education, display, articulation of our rich history and culture of our island community and our people. So I do want to commend this effort and this initiative here and certainly support it. Thank you, and Sidusmasi, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Pangilinan. Madam Speaker, you're up next, and I think the clerk was correct. Your amendment is going to be an amendment to Senator Pangilinan's amendment. He made some change in A, and you're making further changes in A. That's why she was saying
Okay.
it's an amendment to Senator Pangilinan's, and
Yes,
she's correct.
And she's very correct, and thank goodness for her being up there to keep us on track. I do have an amendment as a result of the discussions that we had prior to taking a lunch break, and we actually made even a phone call to the local USDA office and spoke to Mr. Diego. And in the discussion that we had with him, actually then has resulted in this amendment that I would like to offer our members here. And if you go to on page 1, where on line 12 is to delete then the title there where it says the Guam Institute of Cultural Heritage, and go on to the next page, and Natural History. So will be to delete those words, and instead is to replace it with so that then the paying the cost of acquisition, construction, and equipping of an educational facility that reflects a sense of Guam and the Chamorro culture, semicolon, provide for the display of artifacts and historical documents, to stimulate community, and I meant to take out ownership but rather to stimulate community involvement, to foster research and convey the results of research to the public, primarily through the medium of public exhibits, demonstrations, lectures, public programs, and publications using the theme Ihinauta, the journey of the Chamorro people. Such educational facility, SUPRA, will be the permanent home for the preservation and continuance of the Chamorro people. And then it continues on page 2, line 1. And the whole reason for this, Mr. Speaker, is that in our discussion with USDA, a similar process was actually done at the time when USDA had first built the LG building. It was a building that was supposed to have been built under a separate name, but more importantly is that, we wanted to establish where the funding was coming from, and that is from the government of Guam. In this case, we're doing the exact same thing, and it wasn't only until after the facility was built that then the name change actually took place. And then, and by the same token, rather than giving it right now a title per se, without it really describing what it is that we would like this facility, this educational facility to be, is that to describe some of the activities that would be done or taken as or to occur in this educational facility. So I offer this first amendment, but I would like to just make an amendment to my own amendment, and that is to just delete the word their ownership and just make it to stimulate community involvement.
Did everybody get that amendment and the amendment to her written amendment? Anybody wish to speak on the amendment?
the amendment to the amendment first, and let's get it out of the way.
All right, there being no objection, the amendment to the amendment. And now on the amendment.
Okay, yeah, now you can speak on the amendment.
Who wishes to speak on the amendment? Do I see? Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in full support of this amendment. Prior to this amendment being made, in fact, during the floor that the previous speaker from Barragata had, he raised a couple of issues dealing with the name involved in the original, involved in this bill, which was the Institute of Cultural Heritage and Natural History. And in our discussion during lunch, there were some technical legal issues that probably could have arisen from that identification. So this, and I think we all agreed, through working collaboratively with another, how can we get past that so we can perhaps mitigate any legal challenges that may come to this bill? Because I believe we all want to see this effort move forward. It's been a long time coming. A lot of work has been put into it. Many people have devoted major portions of their lives and their time to see it to this point. So make sure that we definitely alleviated any concern about any legal challenges to this. This amendment does exactly that, and it really helps identify exactly what we're doing, why we're doing it for, and so forth. And so I definitely want to thank the good speaker for making this amendment to this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other senators wish to be heard on the Wanpan amendment? Are there any objections to the Wanpan amendment? Hearing no objection, so ordered. Did you wish to speak further, Madam Speaker?
I have one more amendment, and that will be for the title. And that would be where, after the word equipped, and then just to delete everything, and that it would be then to acquire, construct, and equip an educational cultural facility. To acquire, construct, and equip an educational cultural facility. And I will have the amendment for the clerks.
Anybody wish to be heard on that amendment?
No objection. Sorry, maybe.
An educational cultural facility. On the title. After the word equipped, delete everything and add the words an educational cultural facility.
That's a title to the bill. Anybody wish to be heard on the amendment? Is there an objection to the amendment? Madam Speaker, will the body allow the council to work the two amendments that have been, both your amendment and Senator Pangilinan amendment, so that it flows? Senator Pangilinan, can we have legal counsel work that? Because I'm trying to figure out where to put the Plaza de España in here with that long explanation, but somehow work that out, okay? Anybody else wish to be heard on the WANPAD amendment? Oh no, there was no WANPAD amendment. We passed it. Okay, Madam Speaker, do you have anything else? Senator Barnes.
Talawani Sidzuas, Mr. Speaker. Sidzuas Masi for giving me the opportunity to speak and rise in support of this bill number 30-179 as authored by you. And I'd like to extend my undunkaluna Sidzuas Masi for extending me the opportunity to be a part of this sponsorship for this long-awaited educational cultural facility that has been waiting for our community for many, 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 many years. And as we look at what this facility will reflect and give us, give our beautiful island the opportunity to make sure that we realize and feel the sense of our beautiful island, our culture, to make sure that we are given that opportunity to display our artifacts that have long been shelved in places that have been moved from building to building. But more importantly, sir, Mr. Speaker, to know that this facility will be a part of lectures, demonstrations, public programs, and knowing that this facility will be a home so that we can continue to preserve the identity and the history and the culture of our people. I think that is truly a blessing. I know that in the beginning of the term, when we first looked at legislation and a priority of what was needed, because here on this beautiful island, we had no place to call, no place where we could call home to a lot of the artifacts that we had, but also there was no place where tourists could really go and identify and relate to the Chamorro culture and to the Chamorro people and really learn about the history. Several of us, including yourself, my good brother from Barragata, and others working closely in collaboration with the governor's office, because there was a need and a realization that this facility was truly needed, working closely with the Guam Visitors Bureau, and you yourself know that this has been talked about years. And even more importantly, Mr. Speaker, is that we have a major event coming to our island that will entertain thousands and thousands of people within the Pacific region to host the Festival of the Arts. And at that time, we still didn't have a place where we could go to and where we could reflect. And knowing that there was a realization of that and a coming together with the policymakers, working closely with also, like you said earlier, the governor's office or the first lady, and just wanting the community to work closely together. We've worked on all three bills coming together. The ideas were there, the recommendations were there, but we wanted to make sure that the impact of our people, if we needed to build this kind of facility, that it wouldn't impact the pockets of our people at a great extent. And knowing that there was an opportunity to work this grant and facilitate the leveraging of working closely with our federal counterparts, this is coming to a full realization. And I'm just humbled at the fact that we're finally going to realize this concept. And I stand here with great appreciation, Mr. Speaker, that you've been able to move this forward. I've seen the amendments that have been done by both previous speakers, Speaker Wampat and Speaker Ben, and I just know that this makes it for an even better legislation. And I hope that my colleagues will continue to support this move forward so that we can finally have a place where we could call home to a true educational place where we can speak about the history, learn about the island, and know about its people. So again, undankalo na situas masi for giving me the opportunity to speak. on this bill, and I thank my colleagues for sharing a lot in their efforts to move this bill forward. Cesar Masi.
Thank you. Senator Tina Munoz Barnes, Senator Espaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in full support of this bill. I rise in full support as it was originally written, and with the amendments that the good senator from Barragata added to include the Plaza de España area, it became even a stronger bill in my view, because definitely that facility needed to be improved for, again, purposes of cultural preservation and education. And now, of course, with the addition of the Speaker's amendment, it became even a stronger bill to make sure that we're not faced with any potential legal challenges to what the intent of this body is. So I rise in full support. This concept has been a long time coming. As I had mentioned earlier, there are so many people who have put so many hours into making this a reality. And I have to say, again, long overdue. Everybody said it's long overdue, and now definitely is the time to act. Now is the time to move. I'm almost envious of you, Mr. Speaker, as chairman of the committee to help move this along, because I once held the same position, and I know that when I was oversight of this committee of cultural affairs, there were many challenges in terms of how do we get funding. How do we get funding to display the cultural heritage of our people of this island? How do we get funding to make sure that the education, that the children of this island are able to understand and appreciate the history that this island has evolved from? And that was always a challenge. But sometimes timing is everything, and the time is right now. The USDA is definitely willing and has shown its willingness to work closely with this whole community to make sure this happens. There is funding out there available at some very low interest rates. It's time to strike. And if we wait any longer, it could actually be detrimental, because I think as we see daily, as we move forward, we're going to see rising costs. So if we wait any longer, the facility that we're talking about right now may not be as expansive as we would like, as we have planned it to be. It may not be all-encompassing as we have planned it to be. And so this is definitely the time to strike, and I appreciate that. On top of it, when we start looking at the tourism market, there is definitely a big void in terms of having our tourists and our visitors understand where we come from. We all know, as those of us who have traveled, that one of the things that we take great pleasure and enjoyment out of when we visit a different place is to try to understand, is to visit their museums and their places of historic value and where they keep their artifacts, and to learn something about their own culture. That's exactly what we need to display here. We don't have it. I remember as a young boy, somebody mentioned the old museum where we housed Yokoi's items back there at the Plaza de España. I actually used to visit that almost every other week. I thought that was a very intriguing display. I thought it was very interesting. I was a little war history buff back then. And as small as that was, and it was no smaller than probably 500 square feet, that was probably the size of that, 600, 700 at most, not even, maybe the size of a kitchen, if anything. But I tell you, to me, I stopped and I spent hours in there just looking at all the artifacts, trying to really feel and appreciate the value that it brings, if anything, from my perspective, and the appreciation for the historic perspective that it comes with. I like looking at the old pictures. I like looking at the old artifacts. I like looking at the bayonets and things like that. That was just one of those exciting things for me as a child. And now we have the opportunity to do something even grander, to really display and educate our people, not only about a very small period of time, because it's only a very small period back when it was housed at the Plaza de España, but now we actually get to display so many more things for us to learn from that have been hidden away in boxes, that have been sent off island and are housed in other jurisdictions. Now we can bring it home. Now we can proudly display it ourselves. And that's important, because through the years that are going to come, we're going to see an increasing population. And many of these people will have no affinity for this island, will have no understanding of this island except for perhaps what they see. And we don't want them to think that this island is only about some of the modern restaurants and hotels that we have, or again, the lifestyle that we presently exist. We want them to understand and appreciate also that this island and its people are very richly steeped in a culture that dates back thousands and thousands of years. That's important, because then they can now take what they learn and what they come to appreciate about the island back to where they came from. No longer, I think, will we be the butt of the jokes on a late night TV show or at the tail end of a movie saying, oh, you know, go to Guam, and that would be the end of the joke. Or we will not any longer be referred to by servicemen coming here saying this is the Rock. This is not the Rock. This is Guam with a very proud heritage, with a very rich tradition that goes back thousands and thousands of years. You know, I also want to make mention that on one of my trips abroad, I did have an opportunity to speak with the Spanish liaison of cultural affairs to the Philippines. It was at a social gathering, and he invited me to his office, so I did go to his office. And he basically had shown interest that if we were able to establish an educational cultural facility like this, that he was sure that the Spanish government and the Spanish cultural arts community out there would definitely be interested in displaying traveling exhibits here in Guam because of the close historical ties that we have with Spain. And that is encouraging. That opens up a whole broad spectrum of educational opportunities for our people as well to understand. That's exciting. It's also exciting that the funding for this will come from the Tourist Attraction Fund. You heard our speakers speak to it earlier. That is exactly, I think, what the people of Guam really would like to see. To be able to get in contact, have a direct effect of the tourism market on this island, have it directly affect our lives as opposed to, you know, non-visible means. You know, I mean, the argument has always been made, well, the people we hire in the tourism industry pay taxes, and those taxes go to provide facilities, which is totally true. But to get a real buy-in of the people, I believe that they really would like to see something more concrete that they can actually walk into and say, this is being provided for by the dollars from the tourism industry. And that's exciting. Altogether, Madam Speaker, I would like to at least at the very end note, though, that one of our colleagues, the good senator from Mighty, basically asked a question at the end of his statement, which I think everybody knew the answer to, including himself. And his question was, does the governor and does the lieutenant governor support this educational cultural facility? And for the life of me, I don't know why he said it, but of course the answer is obvious. Yes, it is during this administration that much effort has been put into this process. Many people within this administration have put their time and tears and sweat and worries and whatnot to make this a reality. The governor has been behind this all along, and like the good sponsor of the bill said, if anything, the First Lady's behind it. That says a lot. But also I would, and the senator from Mighty then went on to allude that perhaps the governor and lieutenant governor don't support this because they turned down the money, the USDA monies. They were returned. And so that shows that, by implication, that shows that the governor and lieutenant governor does not support a movement like this. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. If the good senator just did a little bit of homework, he would know that the money, that the USDA money that was returned was actually RUS money, which stands for Rural Utilities Service, which was a Rural Utilities Services loan. Now that loan, that money from that loan could not be reprogrammed for any capital improvement projects. That was for the landfill, period, right? So to make an assertion that the governor and the lieutenant governor and this administration does not support it because he returned the USDA loan was only really a conjecture on his part. Because if anybody has been following these loans properly, they would know, including you, Madam Speaker, you know full well that the loan that was returned could not be reprogrammed for any CIP projects. In fact, the money that was, I think that many members of this body were looking to to reprogram into other capital improvement projects was a solid waste bond loan. But that solid waste bond loan actually carries a higher interest rate than what this USDA loan that we are now going after carries. So this is a great time to take advantage of this opportunity. You know that, Madam Speaker, and that's why I know that you've been very supportive of this whole effort in making sure that we get the financing for this educational cultural facility. And again, I just wanted to point that out because I believe it was unfair for the good senator from Mighty to try to make an assertion that this administration did not support this project, knowing full well that the people in this administration, even past administrations, have always supported this project, and that money that he was alluding to had nothing to do with the financing of any capital improvement projects. So again, I just wanted to make that clear for the record, and in essence, I fully support this effort and this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Espadon. And Senator Ogden, since you've returned, you've not lost your place. You're recognized by the... Okay. Oh, okay, I have another one. You're Senator Taitigui then. So after Senator Taitigui, then you, Senator Ogden.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of Bill 179, and I would like to commend the author and also the co-sponsors, as well as Senator from Barragata, who put a lot of effort in this for, I think it was like last session, not last session, but last term that he was in. And I'd also like to recognize, Madam Speaker, the efforts made as well to the group that also spent tireless hours and resources and going out there, pounding the pavement, asking for money to see something like this come to fruition. And I'd like to recognize those individuals from the Guam Museum Trust Foundation and their efforts toward that. Madam Speaker, this becoming a reality, I mean, this step that we're making, can you imagine yourself, Madam Speaker, once this facility is done, where you take the hand of your grandson and walk through the halls of history and teaching him the history of Guam at such a young age? And that's what I see, Madam Speaker. I hope my children will give me grandchildren soon, that I can walk down those halls and explain the history of our people and learn some of the things myself as well. So this is a beginning. So all those who are out there trying to imagine this, imagine a parent holding a child's hand and walking them through that. And that is going to go on from generation to generation to generation. But most especially, Madam Speaker, this is an avenue for those individuals out there who actually have artifacts in their possession, in their private collection. And as they leave us to greater places, where are they going to store those? Who are they going to trust in that what they've held on for so long, an artifact that's so dear to them, to ensure that it would be shared amongst all the people of Guam and her visitors as well? I know a couple individuals, as well as the good author of this bill, who has many of those artifacts in their possession, but are afraid to give it to anybody else, that it might be in a box somewhere in a warehouse collecting dust. So now there's an avenue for those people out there who have that artifacts as well. And I can't help but when I look at Larry Ramirez, the curator, and see his smile. See? He's smiling out there. He has, I'm sorry? Tony, Larry. I have a little cold. It's Tony Ramirez. I'm so sorry. Sorry, Tony. But have a home for him. This is something he's been waiting for, to hang his hat and to begin the work of being able to show these pride and joys of our island of Guam, to showcase them, to care for them, to study them, to research them. And I'm smiling along with Tony as well. I don't know how I came up with Larry, but I thought it was Michael. But once again, Madam Speaker, I fully support this. And then again, my good colleague from Barragata, the former speaker, adding in Plaza de España and the other structures in the plaza is major kudos for that. He put in an historical place that we can't put in the museum, but need to restore it, need to preserve it. And that's something that's been long overdue. As if you walk down right now and see that area, it's almost not there. I have a photograph, Madam Speaker, of the plaza when it was first built in my office, hanging on my wall. And then when I look at it today, more than 50% of it is gone or deteriorated. So I'm so happy to see that is coming to fruition as well and is included into this amendment. So once again, Madam Speaker, I've also asked the author if I may be also a co-sponsor of this bill as well.
So on the motion then to place Senator Taitu and Senator Guthers as co-sponsors without any objection, so ordered.
And thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do look forward to the day seeing you walk down those aisles with your grandson. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Uggan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. And Dunklin, that's Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I believe that much has been said in regards to supporting Bill number 30, that's 179, about the timeliness, or it's about time that in fact something like this is finally put into a statute and that funding is identified. And also this idea about the Tourist Attraction Fund, the annualized debt service being reduced for the next fiscal year from 7.1 to 4.5 has really provided for the opportunity to be able to enact legislation and identify funding for this mechanism. There's two entities I'd like to, in addition to the sponsor, Madam Speaker, I'd like to identify of having been a strong advocate for this process, at least in recent years. When you're talking about the Guam Museum personnel, or you're looking at the individuals who are either in the public hearing room or who have been part of this entire process of formulating the idea, it all starts with a thought or a dream. And in this particular case, they were able to take that idea and transition it to where it is today in terms of formulating the concept itself, the initial design, and then now the legislation. Creates a wonderful opportunity for our people. Talking about historical preservation, a previous legislation that we had entertained during the course of yesterday would have preserved a part of our culture, and that's our language. Here is a facility that ultimately would be constructed to preserve the traditions, the Chamorro traditions, and everything that has transacted or taken place in the history of Guam as part of this particular facility. I think it's wonderful. It's a great idea, and it's fantastic that in fact funding has been identified and that we're moving in this particular direction. But the two entities I wanted to also recognize, Madam Speaker, were the ones that have pushed this over the course of the recent years to where it is today. The other entity is, we are here because representatives from the U.S. Department of Agriculture have extended themselves in conversations with representatives of the government of Guam and also with the chair or the sponsor of this legislation, and had shared that there are some resources available specifically for the construction of this museum facility or Cultural Heritage Institute. That particular organization has extended itself over the course of the last 2.5, 3 years, above and beyond, I believe, what they had done in the prior years, only because of the available resources that were provided to USDA under the guise of the ARA funds and under the guise of other financial opportunities. And I think for USDA to continue to look at Guam and say, you have an institute that you would like to construct, called a museum, you would like to preserve your culture, you would like to do something so that in fact it enhances your economic benefits for the community of Guam, that we want to step in and offer some financial resources in that regard. And I say, in that tone, I extend the acknowledgement and the appreciation, at least from myself, because, Madam Speaker, you know very intimately that there's also another proposal that is in the hopper that is also leaning forward in terms of trying to identify some resources out of this particular USDA entity so that they can assist with educational facilities here in Guam. That, I think, speaks well of itself. When you're looking at anywhere up to $25 million that could conceivably be made available for preserving the history of Guam in a facility called the Institute of Cultural Heritage and Natural History, or the Guam Museum. On the other hand, you look at that same facility, the same entity, USDA, that had provided $13.5 million not too long ago to help construct the business college or administration building at the University of Guam, and then once again maybe stepping up to provide some additional financial support for an educational facility on island. I think kudos goes out to them for keeping their minds open in terms of making some finances available to the people of Guam and to the community. But aside from that, Madam Speaker, having highlighted individuals who have worked on the museum concept for several years now, coming from this administration, also with the chair of tourism and also the prior chair of tourism, having worked conceptually on this idea for a number of years, it's wonderful to see that in fact in a matter of a few months that perhaps we may be looking at a groundbreaking ceremony and eventually a ribbon cutting ceremony that would allow the people of Guam, or provide the people of Guam, a wonderful facility that they can call their own, and that they can in actuality say that Guam's history, part of Guam's history, can be visited in that particular facility. And I think that that's truly wonderful on the part of an individual who, on the part of myself, who continues to look at tourism as really sharing the land, the sun, and the sea, but most especially the people in that particular community. I think this museum would be an added feature to our tourism industry, and I certainly look forward to its eventual construction and the ultimate benefits that it will provide our entire island, and most especially not only for our visitors, most especially for the people of Guam, and just as especially for future generations in our community. So I close with that particular comment, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, if I can just make a suggestion to, or move for deletion of one particular section that I don't think it may be necessary unless someone else in the room thinks that it is. It's subsection E on page 3 that reads additional general obligation debt. That particular provision reads, nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent the government of Guam from issuing, after appropriate enabling legislation, other general obligations of the government on a parity with or subordinate to the debt authorized by the section on such terms as may be provided by the certificate pursuant to which the debt is issued. Because there's clarity in regards to the nature of this obligation, it will be a limited obligation fund or loan. It no longer is looking at the general fund or section 30 as a backdrop in terms of providing support. I did consult with legal counsel, and thanks to
that amendment already has been passed.
Oh, it already has
passed. That is
okay, I apologize.
Limited, obligation.
Just moving to delete subsection E.
Oh, okay, that's different then.
Only by virtue of my explanation, because it's no longer a general obligation bond. It is now a limited obligation loan fund. In this particular case, this is a section that may not be necessary in the consideration of this entire proposal. So, Madam Speaker, I'd like to move for the deletion of that section. Subsection E, page 3.
So your motion then is to delete on page 3, subsection E. Is there anyone who would like to speak on it?
Thank you. I want to thank the Chair of Finance for his general concurrence by virtue of not taking the mic. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
No objection to the amendment, then subsection E is duly passed. So that means we need to renumber then those subsections. Well, we've exhausted the list. Oh, okay, Senator Pangilinan.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just want to make one final amendment, and I think it's verbal, to add a new section, and that it would just read, the location of the educational facility authorized herein shall be approved by the legislature.
On that amendment, without any objection, so ordered. Can you please give a copy of that to the clerks? Thank you. So on the motion then to send Bill 179-30 as substituted by the committee and also further substituted on the floor to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. Let's see, on the list of bills that are ready for discussion, we're gonna, we have two, Espaldon and then Respicio.
I have a point of inquiry, and maybe that we can have somebody in that. I understand that on the previous bill noted, just for keepsake, that the land was transferred in 1993, so we just may need a verification before that gets, I'm looking into the information right now. So,
we need to just take a brief recess then, because two of the members who are supposed to present their bill are not present. Okay, so
Thank
we'll
you.
take a brief recess. Legislature is back in session. Moving down the line of second reading, and we're bypassing some bills until such time that the authors are here. So I will recognize Senator Pangilinan on bill number 407. That. I have it right here in my desk.
What's
No, you don't have the bill itself. Nagaratatpan, Senador. Un minuto está na recess.
okay? Loti recess.
The legislature is back in session. We're hoping that everyone now has a copy of Bill 407, and I recognize Senator Pangilinan.
Mrs. Masi, and thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move that Bill 407-30 COR be moved to the third reading file, and I'd like to discuss the bill.
Please continue.
Thank you very much, and Mrs. Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 407 would authorize the design and minting of a medal to be given to Guam soldiers who gave their full measure of devotion and sacrifice in service to our island and our country. There are many things that we do to honor the service of our men and women, husbands and brothers, wives, in service to the country. And each of these individuals and loved ones have family that they leave behind. And in some instances, in many instances, in most instances, after they perform their service to the country and to the island, in the preservation of the life that we lead today so that we can enjoy the freedoms of a democratic nation and a peaceful world, they come home and they're able to reunite with the family and move on with their lives. But in some instances, some of our loved ones that go off to battle and to foreign lands, unknown places on this earth to them, strange lands, they give their lives in that field of battle, and they do not return home. And the only thing that the family has is the memories that they have left behind and the memories that's in their heart. And we honor these individuals through public edifices, public naming of roads and signs that tell us who they are. But in many instances, we don't know what they did. In Barrigada, one of the ways that we honor those men and women of our village that fell in the fields, in the rice fields and the rice paddies of Vietnam, is that when you see a name of a street in Barrigada named after a military person, it'll be a street in which that person lived or his family lived, of the person who gave his life in that rice paddy and that rice field in Vietnam. So I live on Sergeant R. I actually live on Sergeant R. Pete Leon Guerrero Street, and Sergeant Pete Leon Guerrero went off to Vietnam and never came home. Further up the street, there's a Sergeant David Funes Street, and David Funes went off to battle and never came home. My family lives on a street named Sergeant R. Robert Mendiola. And he, of course, is a family member, very close family member of ours. And that road recognizes him for his service. He was a helicopter gunner who went off to war. And Robert was even more atypical of a soldier at that time, because Robert had an older brother who was in Vietnam at the time and in the field of battle. And Robert did not have to go to the field of battle in service as a soldier. But Robert insisted that he wanted to go ahead and serve his time. And he didn't want to be one of the group of friends who decided to join the military at that time who didn't go off to battle, because all his other friends that he went in with went on to the war and to the field of battle. Robert could have stayed behind because he already had another brother who was already in the, but he decided he was going to go on with his service. So these are the names of these people. And for us who live on the streets every day, I certainly remember, and as a young person growing up in Barrigada, I know these young men, older than me, because at that time they, of course, were of age for the draft, and most of them volunteered, though. They weren't drafted. And so in Barrigada we have this, but in other villages and other men, we have now the medal of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Barrigada, and you see the names on those. And so what we wanted to do, what I wanted to do, was something a little bit more personal for the families of these fallen soldiers. And that was to commission, again, and to put into place a program that would allow the minting of a coin or a medal to be given to these family members for the sacrifice issued only to the families of soldiers who fell in battle in service to our country in the preservation of democracy, so that we can continue to enjoy the freedoms we have today and continue to enjoy not only the freedoms we have today in America, in Guam, but the freedoms that we have today in the world. The service that these young men and women perform does not only extend to the democracy of what we call America, but it extends the freedom and the liberties of a world to the rest of the world, to other places on this earth. You know, so when we talk about, you know, why are we fighting a war in Afghanistan, you know, you should all just retrench and just ensure that our borders are free and our people are free within America. Our young men and women are willing to put themselves on the line because this world is our world. And our borders are no longer just the borders and the physical borders of our country, but they extend to the borders of the concept and the ideal and the vision of democracy and the rights that all human beings should enjoy on this earth. And so this would personalize a lot more the recognition by our government, our people here on Guam, to the families of these individual soldiers who have fallen in the field of battle. And so the bill was introduced to allow for the designation of a medal that would be minted, and that medal was to be called the Guam Medal of Honor. Now, when we did this, we thought that this will be appropriate in terms of recognition of when a Medal of Honor is awarded, and that designating that this was specific to Guam's recognition of these men and women. But we do have, of course, and many people know, if not everyone on this floor, that there is this award awarded by the United States government called the Medal of Honor. And that Medal of Honor is the highest honor that a soldier can be given who demonstrates valor and bravery in the field of battle. And so there was some concern that we just received, and I just received this concern, that if we called this medal that we're giving to these families the Guam Medal of Honor, it may be confused with the Congressional Medal of Honor, and that certainly is not my intention. And so what we need to do, or what they're requesting, is that we find a new designation, a new name for this Medal of Honor, or this Medal of Recognition to our soldiers, our men and women who fall in the heat of battle. And so, just given very short time to think about it, I certainly wanted to honor that request by the veterans to ensure that we don't confuse it. And actually, I think it's pretty good that they brought this forward, even though it's last minute, because it gave me a chance to reflect on how we're honoring our men and women. So I wanted to then make an amendment on the name of this throughout the bill. So wherever we refer to the Guam Medal of Honor, I wanted it to now change that so that it would read by the designation of, for example, in the title, of a Guam medal to be called the Miladsan Mastatkilu na Sacrificiu. It's the medal of the highest sacrifice. And so this recognizes then, and the highest sacrifice, of course, is the sacrifice of that full measure of service to the country. And in almost all instances, that full measure really is they've given up their lives. So I would then amend the bill so that the medal is referred to as the Guam medal called Miladsan Mastatkilu na Sacrificiu. And that would be consistent throughout the bill, where it's referred to as the Medal of Honor.
Can we get that, because we're going to need the spelling?
I have it right here.
Okay.
And so that would be the proposed amendment I have, the first amendment I would have to the bill.
Okay, so on that amendment, without
And allow a certified Chamorro translator to make any corrections to that.
Okay, so without any objections, then so ordered. Senator Penguin, then you may
The second
continue.
amendment I would like to make, Madam Speaker, is of course, the second amendment I would like to add is the sponsorship of the bill. And I want to thank my colleagues who have stepped forward to show devotion to our men and women by requesting that they be added as co-sponsors. And of course, I'd like to add, after Senator Ada, yourself, Senator Wampat, Senator Tina Muna-Barnes, Senator Guthertz, and then Senator Uggan as co-sponsors in that order on this bill. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank you to all of my colleagues for helping me in moving forward on this bill in recognition and providing a more personal commemoration to the families of our men and women who have given their ultimate sacrifice, their highest sacrifice in service to our island and our country.
Thank you very much, Senator Penguin. And on the main motion, Senator Uggan, you're recognized.
Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I sternly stand here in support of the now called Miladsan Mastatkilu na Sacrificiu. I understand that's a correct enunciation or pronunciation of the award that would be offered as Guam's highest and ultimate sacrifice. I better make sure I say this correctly. Guam's award given to individuals who pay the ultimate sacrifice. You know, Madam Speaker, when you look at this legislation, first of all, before I proceed, I'd like to move for the addition of the following individuals, Madam Speaker, for consideration on the placement of sponsorship. My good colleague who's also a veteran, our good colleague who's also a veteran, Senator Tony Ada, and then also the good senator from Barrigada, Senator Frank Blas Jr. I understand both of them are also veterans and have served in the armed forces. So, Madam Speaker, if I can move for the addition of their names to this particular legislation.
That amendment, then, without any objection, so ordered.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I certainly stand in full support of this legislation. I don't know if, in fact, you're aware or if our colleagues are aware, there's another piece of legislation that also would provide other awards and distinctions that would be offered by the Guam National Guard. It's legislation that I had introduced a number of months ago, and I had asked the chairman of the Oversight Committee that had received the referral if by any chance she can proceed with the public hearing, and I certainly appreciate her response in terms of moving in that direction, because that also would, it did identify the establishment of a similar medal for individuals who would provide the ultimate sacrifice in service to our country and to our island. But most importantly, it also provided some other tiers of awards, tier TIERS, other tiers of awards for individuals who either have served our community with distinction in the U.S. Armed Forces, whether they be members of the National Guard, the Reserves, or active duty, and then also would provide special military distinction and recognition for individuals who are civilians who provide tremendous support for members in the armed forces. So, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the body because I certainly hope that ultimately that would be considered by this body in terms of an eventual adoption and possibly signage into law, because the idea was presented to my office by members of our armed forces. But Madam Speaker, when you look at this award, you ask yourself, what exactly is the ultimate purpose? And the ultimate purpose is to be able to recognize, like the sponsor of the legislation had shared with us, recognize individuals who have served in our armed forces, who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. And I say this with a lot of, I guess, internal, I guess it's difficult for me to express it because of some of the things that I have had the opportunity and the honor to have experienced in a land far away. But when you see family members, whether they are from Guam or from the region, and you experience the loss that they have gone through, there's nothing that can even offset that service of that armed forces member. And I think that this is a token of recognition that would be extended on behalf of the community of Guam and on behalf of the people of Guam in terms of recognizing that sacrifice that was provided by that individual. You know, Madam Speaker, this is an award that we certainly hope may never have to be presented to an individual. But the reality is, as we face and we are in two wars simultaneously, the war on terror, which is inclusive of Afghanistan as well as Iraq, Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom, obviously it presents situations where the community of Guam, since 9/11, have had, I believe, no less than 14 individuals, residents of Guam, lost their lives as a result of participation and service in our armed forces. And just in those two wars alone, which continues at this point in time. And I bring that up because it brings a sense of reality to the nature of what we're discussing here. We're looking at recognizing family members or recognizing an individual who has served in the armed forces, who has made or had made the ultimate sacrifice by giving his or her life in service in war. And when you look at just since 2001, that this community of 178,000 individuals, Guam residents, we've lost 14. No less than 14. And one of the biggest selling points or phrases that we have as a community continue to use repeatedly whenever we try to sell this idea about the military build-up, about, in fact, the community of Guam has been the most patriotic community nationwide per capita, I think it speaks for itself. And I certainly hope that not only does this medal, or is this medal accepted and recognized by the individual family members, but that certainly the tribute given to the individual who unfortunately would have to come back home to families. And perhaps anyways, Madam Speaker, let me just close by thanking the sponsor for the introduction of this legislation. I think that it's a wonderful tribute and a recognition of our people who have served. And I certainly hope that the community and the chief executive will be able to implement this as quickly as possible, because obviously we've lost too many lives already. And I hope that we don't have to lose any more during the course of not only the ongoing wars that we're participating in, but also in any of the future conflicts that our community of Guam participate in. So, Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this particular measure in recognizing the now named Milazan para I Mastakulu na Sacrificio, the ultimate sacrifice, and it's appropriately worded, and for honoring our men and women who have served not only our country, but most importantly our island, and who have made that ultimate sacrifice.
Haguma, Senator Agan, Buen Pubetsu. Senator Tony Ada, you're recognized to speak. Or is it Senator Tom? Dispensa. It just says Ada here. Consigi, Senator Tom Ada.
Na adaw kwentos. No, Madam Speaker, tumutuyo ni pabisupoti esti mapropoponi na bill ni para managwaha edzi miladzan mas 3 kilo na sacrificio. No, lo antes de betutu mana be salangyo dididi put no masudadzog yuzung zanon veterano sakala nina in tribukau hinasodnya puristina lai saliknya kosinang kompara if snaning yu puristi dos na sindalo ni manaw gumera yun sindalo matay sa ani matatatsung i zonya ten pakpak bomba gi Fiona sa Pinino. Pues si otro sindalo matay gi gera sa nu ani mahanaw papa gi man mamatsa papa gi trail nu man maambush pues nu magait matay sa pudi atarabira gi put parahu adzuday i amigunya siya lo zangin ketwa gi saganya bentiti umatay lo atarabira gi sa put po adzuday i amigunya siya sa entonces ginin edzo ni abira gi tati na asoday finatay niya pesentrigaw gi hinasoko no hunggan no diferentes na circumstance na masoday finatay niya lo gi losotumos at samatay dos gi animano gumera ni poprotehi i slata dan i tautauta dan i stisha i ta gogusa pago na i freedom pues pagod ti pabina komplikao gi hinasoko ko mas no 3 kilo zonya no sacrificio pa isti otro ni pudi matatatsunga gi zonya no 10 sa no podong i bomba gi Fiona no sangya todo no angin matu yorata sangya teniki no finataita no sa ti spipiano ko para ta fan tamano tihita para ta dirihi tamano para finataita lo ang Paraguaho $16 ni manhano man voluntario po fanggera ni put po maprotehe no jangin edzo na masoday finatay niya pues leko na debilu fan marikot nisa edzo na sacrificia so fan manaw inis tina miladza pues no importante na ta recognize edzo data fanui na ta agradece edzo na sacrificio ni manay esta lukita nanay ta recognize edzo siya yasagwa i mambiuda zani mambiudo ni put i stigera na tanan na esta pagu ma-autorisa ni po sina man manaay ni zi Gold Star license plate ni po ni sina para ta recognition na hunggan iasagwa niya Mano Gumera pes lo matu na asoda gi pinatay niya. Iminagay importante na tanay niste siya ng milazar sa tarikognisa isakripisyo niya. Lo gwagwa luki talo siya otrusina tatsoge sa tisinya na para ta amunaza niste na tafamara gi sa stanahong no recognisa manay. Nisita taspia tasiga munay empenyo ni para tanay salapi ni para mana bonito so ma famole gid papa i veteran cemetery sa edzul sotimos na mamahahafod i sendalo sa talia na megay na bray veterano man kalan man hawhaw sa pudi no ti i tsagwan 3 kilo ti mapipinta siya i crips gi papa pues nisita na tisina mamara gini siga papa tataspia lo kita na siguro na i semetedzo tananay salapi pero siguro na mana gagasgas na mana bonito sa magayet na edzo na utmo na sagan onra na sina para tanafan tapoli i zota siya sendalo pues no enwa pago besangan na besopotes sa importante na tafanui na ta agradece todo sacrificio ni man matsobi. Dios mase.
Agumas buen pubetsu, Senador. Senador Tony Ada, por favor, consigi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first I would like to recognize the good senator from Barrigada for introducing this bill. It goes to show that we never forget. Serving in the military is an honor. Recognizing those that serve is a higher honor. We sleep at night comfortably because we have those that are out there protecting our freedom every day. We have brothers or sisters. Some even have parents that are still in the military. And sometimes we do take for granted that freedom that we do have. But whenever we take the time to recognize the sacrifices that they do make, it is just such a little token of what we can do. No words, no medals, nothing can ever replace the life of a loved one who gave that ultimate sacrifice. But recognizing them and always remembering them will give that little piece of comfort to the families that did lose a loved one. And this does just that. It gives that recognition. It gives that remembrance that the people of Guam will always remember the sacrifice, that ultimate sacrifice that they have made. As I was looking through the bill, and I got down to the part on page 2 where it says, those individuals that are eligible, we go through the Guam National Guard who are residents of Guam at the time he or she was killed in action. Then members of the United States Military Reserve who are legal residents of Guam at the time that he or she was killed in action. Then on page 3, on line 1, we go members of the regular United States Armed Forces who were residents of Guam at the time that he or she was killed in action. When I was in the military and I transferred, I was stationed in Fort Campbell. And my residence then became Fort Campbell. It became Tennessee. So maybe just as an amendment to this, that we can change who are residents of Guam at the time, could probably, whose home of record was Guam at the time that he or she was killed. Because home of record is the place where that individual had joined the military, and that's their intention, that when they retire or when they get discharged, that they go back to that home of record. So I think just that short amendment there to strike out were residents of and insert whose home of record was Guam at the time that he or she was killed in action.
Whose home record?
Whose home of record was Guam.
Okay, on the amendment, Senator Frank Ogden, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in support of the amendment, but just for the information of members who are not too closely affiliated with the military, what it is that when any of our Guam residents depart Guam, let's say, for example, active duty, as long as they continue to designate Guam as a home of record, the good share of finance will continue to receive the proceeds from the Section 30 funds as a result of that. So basically, it's a direct recognition that Guam, that individual originated from Guam or continues to consider himself or herself a resident of Guam. And in this particular case, really that's the military designation in terms of exactly where you want to call yourself more or less a permanent resident. So that's a military terminology that's used, home of record, and regardless as to where all of our active duty personnel are, whether they have been serving in active duty in different jurisdictions for the last 20 years, as long as they call Guam their home of record, then they will continue to be recognized accordingly that Guam is their original residence of place. So just for that clarification, thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. Are there anyone else wishing to speak on the Tony Ada amendment? If not, on the motion, no objection. Motion carries. Senator Ada, you still have the floor. Are you done?
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you.
Sito Smasi. Senator Frank Blas, bro, you're recognized.
Sito Smasi, Madam Speaker. Sis. Madam Speaker, first off, I'd like to also recognize the good senator, speaker from Barragata, the good senator from Mangilaw, the good senator from Mangilaw too, for their collaborative efforts and for giving us to put this legislation together, and for the opportunity to provide a number of us in great show of respect and support of this legislation, the opportunity to co-sponsor this legislation as well. And you know, the good senator from Afami, Senator Anya, spoke very eloquently as to not only the need, but the reason why this is important. And I admit, yes, this is but a small token, for lack of a better term, phrase, word, of our appreciation for a soldier, seaman or an airman or guardsman to give their ultimate sacrifice, to give the ultimate sacrifice in serving not only our nation, but more importantly, is our island. And you know, ma'am, along those lines and wanting to make sure that we we don't leave any of those individuals out, that we honor them, and that down the road there's really no confusion as to whether or not the conflict or the action that these individuals, and mind you, knock on wood, but maybe that we don't lose another soldier. But reality is, it's probably inevitable. And that said, is so that we're able to recognize all those individuals who have already gone, and those individuals that may inevitably leave us because of their duty, and through their duty and their sacrifice, is to offer an amendment to be found on page 2, line 15. And if you read, actually starting from line 12, to express unending and never forgotten gratitude by the people of Guam. The Guam Medal of Honor is hereby established and shall be presented to the family members of individuals killed in action in World Wars II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Operation Desert Storm, and the War on Terror. But recognizing that there are other conflicts that are going on today, there were other conflicts that had gone on. There are other conflicts, there are conflicts that will inevitably begin, is that we recognize that. And on line 15, again on page 2, we strike out the word and then after the War on Terror, put comma and other actions as defined in subsection C of this section. And other actions as defined in subsection C of this section. Because if you turn to subsection C, it does give a definition basically of what those actions are. So instead of having to spell, say enduring freedom, Iraqi freedom, war in support of Iraqi freedom, and war in support of the War on Terror, it's already defined in subsection C. So we further define it as, again, and other actions as defined in subsection C of this section. So it'll read, if I can, on line 15, the Vietnam War, Operation Desert Storm, the War on Terror, and other actions as defined in subsection C of this section.
On that motion, are there anyone else wishing to speak on it? Are there any objections? There's no objections.
Thank you, Madam. And Madam Speaker, so that there is no confusion, and we do honor all our fallen heroes. On page 4, actually, line 16, section 4, and I have already conferred with the good author of this legislation. Section 4, this act shall take effect on October 1st, 2010. He actually does not, and I don't see the need for that section. I think that once this is done, we can start the commissioning. There is a process that has to take place, and so this doesn't also delineate, and there is no confusion as to whether or not we can include individuals who have since given the ultimate sacrifice prior to October 1st, 2010, or does this act and its entirety and the program take effect for all those that have henceforth. So in order to eliminate that confusion, is just basically strike out
Delete section 4.
Section 4.
On that motion to delete section 4, anyone wishing to speak on the amendment? If not, are there any objections? No objections. Motion carries. Is Senator Blas still on the main motion?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, once again, I want to thank the good authors for this legislation and the opportunity to be able to co-sponsor this. Again, it's but a small token, but I think that any time we're given the opportunity to continue to honor our men and women who sacrifice, who make that ultimate sacrifice, we should take that opportunity. So with that, I ask my colleagues for their support as well in this legislation. Thank you very much.
Ben Pabetso, Senator Blas. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? Senator Tom Atta, do you have I know you spoke earlier, but is there a concern?
Just as a point of inquiry, and
Please proceed.
right now the medal is designed to be presented to family members of individuals killed in action. Now, I guess when you read that, that presumes that that individual in the battlefield got killed. But there are also individuals who got wounded seriously, were brought back, and maybe lived on for another month or two, but subsequently died as a result of wounds received while in combat. And it's not clear if the bill would then make that soldier eligible for consideration for the medal. He didn't die instantly on the battlefield. He died maybe a couple of months later as a result of the wounds that he received in the battlefield.
I'm going to go ahead and ask Speaker Ben if he'd like to answer that inquiry. Would you like to yield, Speaker Ben?
Maybe if I may suggest an amendment on page 2 there, on line 15, after the word terror, we put down comma. Well, I would need a few minutes, but basically to the effect that subsequently died from wounds received.
Senator Atta, we're going to go ahead and take a minute recess. I know it's after 5, but we'll go ahead and take a minute recess so that you can work out your amendment. This legislature is back in session. Senator Ada, you had the floor. You're done. Anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? Speaker Wanpat, was that a raised hand that you wanted to speak, or? Okay. Speaker Pangilinan, Ben, you're recognized. Consigi, por favor.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank my colleagues who, of course, contributed to ensuring that that the bill really reflects the intentions and realize that any service that any soldier provides to this country deserves recognition, and that we are trying in this bill to distinguish a level of service that results in the death of that soldier and patriot while he is serving our country in a battlefield, in a action by our country in the defense of liberty and freedom and our way of life. And there are many, many other levels of service that every individual provides when he puts on that uniform. And each and every one of those services and each and every day that they are in uniform, we recognize and we honor these individuals. And this additional recognition for those that pay the ultimate sacrifice is really so that we can continue to provide for the families a personal tribute and a personal recognition that can be passed on from one generation to the next, so that not only do we remember by ensuring that we enshrine the names of these individuals in the Guam Legislature Hall when it's done in the permanent hall of our legislature, but that these families also have this personal memento, personal recognition and honor that this government of ours wants to bestow upon them, that they can have and treasure and cherish forever in memory of the ultimate sacrifice, imastatkilu na sacrificio, for those loved ones who went off to battle and never came home to enjoy the life that they defend. So thank you, and Sidus Masi to all of my colleagues for your kind contribution to this measure. Sidus Masi.
Did we move this to? This is moved to third reading. With that being said, it's already 5:25. We are going to go ahead, and before we call for a recess for tomorrow at 9, I'm just going to say that there's several bills up. If I'm not mistaken, there's Bill, we'll go back to Bill 188 with Senator Espaldon, and then Bill 418, Senator Palacios. And we'll work in the numbers subsequent to that. So, Senators, we are in recess till tomorrow at 9. Have a good evening. 9 a.m. Thank you.